Hallelujah. Grace and peace to all families and friends of the Hackensack United Methodist Church. This is the seventh and last session on the book of Job. I would like to take this opportunity to share my own reflections on what we have shared on the book of Job for the last 6 sessions. When you look into the argument on suffering exchanged between Job and his friends, we expected an answer to the question on why do good people suffer. So I would like to share a thought about the question, why do good people suffer? To me, the book of Job seems to suggest that we have to face the reality that evil situations and suffering are prevalent in the world. Job's friends kept the theological position that evil situations and sufferings are caused by the person's sins. But Job objected to this theological position and argued that anyone could fall into the situations of suffering because evils and sufferings are everywhere in the world. Further, through Elihu's and God's speeches, the book of Job added a meaning to Job's argument of prevalence of evil and sufferings. That is, life and suffering could be meaningful even though it's not a happy moment. Elihu says that we should live a meaningful life though it is hard, and that we can be a suffering servant like Isaiah's proclamation as a sign of the Messiah. In fact, we hear the stories like a great faithful person who lost his son by being murdered, but who adopted the murderer as his son. In New Jersey, there is a lay elder in a Korean immigrant church who dedicated his life to build a Christian school and a Christian retreat center to remember his son whom he lost in mission. We are many great people who get over the loss and suffering by finding meaning out of suffering and making actions to elevate to sublime moment of life. Through God's speeches, the book of Job advances the idea of suffering servant, deep sense of wisdom in God by saying that God rules life in the world and manages the world in order, in which evil and wild sufferings are tamed accordingly. Even though we understand the viewpoint on suffering in the book of Job, we still have the question that what is good about having faith in God if there is no difference in facing sufferings and challenges in life? We are not comfortable with the argument that evils and sufferings are prevalent, too good and too bad people altogether in the world. Job's friend rather insists that God favors the righteous, keeping them from evils and sufferings, which Job could not agree with. In relation to Job's understanding of suffering, prevalent in the world, and yet God's ruling over evils and sufferings, we learn the same idea in the creation stories in the book of Genesis. We note 2 things in Genesis. First, evil and suffering are prevalent in the world after Adam's sin and fall. We are not living in the Garden of Eden, but in the wilderness. They had to cultivate the wilderness to live. The first story we read about life after the fall, the righteous Abel was killed by the sinful Cain. God works in the midst of such tragedy and suffering for the good to manage life. Suffering is prevalent over the good and the bad altogether. Second, God blesses the good people in faith in the midst of sinful and suffering situations. The blessing is not avoiding suffering, but it's about managing situations. God blesses us with and to have abilities to manage them. We remember that the punishment given to Adam were labors that he has to endeavor in order to get the produces and the fruits to eat and live. But the punishments were not really the punishment per se. It was a new way of living, even in the wilderness. The stories of Adam's descendants describe how they lived successfully. They did not fail in living in the wicked and wild wilderness. Also, we have to remember the first blessing that God gave the first man, Adam, when he created. Rule the world, multiply in the world. It was about managing the world and lived of many descendants through generations. This blessing of managing the world continued even after the fall. It is a godly ability because God manages the world and life to be orderly, as the book of Job recognizes through God's speeches. The question, why do good people suffer, presupposes that good people should not suffer because God is powerful enough to prevent the evil things from occurring in the good people's lives. But Job says, no, we are gifted to manage the situations of suffering and endure the life of blessing. The end of Job's story tells us that God will bless us to win over suffering. Job receives double blessings. His properties doubled, his sons and daughters restored. But one thing changed. Job's view on sons and daughters standing against the traditional view of inheritance. Job's daughters receive the same portions of inheritance as Job's sons. Each individual, no matter that person is a son or a daughter, receives the same ability and blessing to live life through challenges and suffering in life. The book of Job, therefore, suggests that we will be able to live a fruitful and blessed life even in suffering situation. Then we come to a question. Isn't it hard to live such a challenging life in suffering even though we are people of God? Right. It is not easy to continue to be righteous and good in life of suffering. But we have the blessing of God which enables us to go through suffering to bear sublime fruits of life in God. I would like to keep in mind and heart the ending of Job's story, that Job received double portions of blessing, which could be the reward of life as the sign of suffering servant. I pray that all of you may receive many blessings from God and manage your life in blessings. God bless you.